Welcome to the podcast this week. We have a very special guest in the episode today. Joseph Marini is a renowned event designer and influencer in the lifestyle space, whose work has been featured in the New York Times, Oprah Magazine, Town and Country, Better Homes and Gardens, and more. And he recently wrote a book called Mastering the Art of Entertaining. So, Joseph, thank you so much for being here today. I know we're all going to learn a lot from you and from your experience, and it's kind of cool to have like a professional on because here I am just like trying to do this as just like a normal person. So it'll be great to hear your experience today.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I'd love if you could tell us a little bit about your background, like how you got into event design or just kind of this like, um, lifestyle homemaking space that you're in.
Yeah, sure. So I really grew up as a young kid. My mom did a lot of hosting, usually for holidays and birthday parties and all of that stuff. And as a little kid, I always loved helping her set the table and help her cook and whatever. And I went through 4 years of college getting an accounting degree and then worked for a caterer during that time and realized my passion was in food. And so I ended up going to culinary school, and I went with the understanding that I really never wanted to work in a restaurant. I loved the whole entertaining aspect that catering provided, and so graduated culinary school and started a catering business, and I had it for about 20 years. And I would say about halfway through, I transitioned more into the design end of it because I was really noticing for quite a while that I would work really hard to create all this beautiful food and bring it to people's homes to cater for them. And they had done nothing in their house to prepare for this party,
Oh gosh.
or nothing was color coordinated, or they didn't know where their napkins were and they weren't ironed. And I saw like this whole side of like, okay, this is all what even when you're having something catered, you still have a responsibility of being the host. And so I actually phased out a lot of the food part of it. I still did small dinner parties and private functions and weddings, but I phased a lot of that out and I went more into the event design aspect of it, because I just felt like that was truly one area where people really had a hard time.
Yeah, totally. Oh my gosh. I can't imagine like showing up and like nothing being set up. Um, I love what you said about like having a responsibility of being the host. Like, even if you're trying to be super casual or like spontaneous, hey, just come over. Like, there are still things that you kind of need to do to like have people there. And I think
There
maybe
are,
we kind
yeah,
of forget that sometimes when we're trying to be like casual about things, like you do still have to host.
yeah.
I was talking with my husband yesterday about a friend that was supposed to be like bringing a dish to her family's Easter celebration, but she was at my house at the time that she was supposed to be there. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you haven't, you're supposed to be there. You haven't made this dish. She said she needed to go to the store still. I was like, I can't operate like
Oh
this.
my
Like,
God. Yeah.
you're not like
No.
following the plan here. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Pre-planning is important.
it is. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, it just reminded me of that of like not being prepared. And
Yeah.
it's like I don't operate that way. I don't know how other people
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
um,
and I think sometimes we've all been in that situation and it takes us by surprise sometimes, but then we realize I don't want to do that again.
right.
It's because it becomes uncomfortable for almost everybody involved.
Yeah, for sure. When you're kind of like frantically racing around and people are there, or
Hmm.
you're not just not prepared for sure. I
Yeah.
know that you said you went to culinary school, which is kind of after this whole military thing. I'm like, maybe I should go to culinary school, but I'm interested or like excited to hear that you didn't have to like go the restaurant route because that like I don't want to do that whatsoever. I just want to like hone my skills. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's like encouraging to hear.
Yeah, and there's you can also find courses too just to get certification in basic culinary background. So you don't have to go for a whole degree for it necessarily. There are colleges that do like a 6 month to a 1 year certification, and they'll basically teach you the basics. I studied both in the US and in Europe. And I was in Europe for almost 6 months studying, and I would say I learned 95% of my education there
I can
versus in the
imagine.
US. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do know that you live part-time in France. Is there anything you're doing to kind of maintain your community here in the States and in France whenever you're like away for, I imagine you're away for like longer periods of time. You're not just going for like a week or something, but like longer periods of time. So how do you kind of like stay in touch or, maintain those communities while you are gone for a while?
Yeah. Yeah. So when we try to go 3 or 4 times a year, and each time it's for about a month. And so, typically the time that my husband and I cook almost every night. So even though we're in France and there's these amazing restaurants, we spend lunch going to restaurants and then we shop and we cook almost every night. And that's sort of our time to call friends and family and catch up while we're having a glass of wine and cooking. And it sort of makes it like a interactive thing because we're showing them what we're doing. So that's usually the time that we'll take to reach out and connect with people back at home.
Oh, that sounds like a lovely schedule
Yeah.
to just like lunch in France and then cook at home. And oh
Yeah.
gosh, that's great.
I mean, we both work while we're there, but it's just you're just in such a different mindset that it almost doesn't even feel like you're working, and it's just like you're in a whole nother world.
Yeah, gosh, lovely. I can't wait until I get to do that with my life. Um, Here on the podcast, we talk a lot about like wanting like how impactful it is to be invited and included as a guest. But you
Mhm.
said something about like how hosting has been a gift to you, like or it can be a gift to anyone as the host. So what does that mean? Or like
Mhm.
how can hosting be a gift almost as much as
Mhm.
like being a guest?
Yeah. So what it really does, so I have found, for a long time, I sort of struggled with, you know, creating connections and being seen and making friends. And I realized I excelled the most and connected the most with people when I was entertaining for friends and for me, I was doing it professionally, but then I realized, well, I'm not doing this for myself and I'm working all the time. And so I started really coming back and hosting my own parties. And for me, it allowed me to sort of, professionally, I'm in a different mindset than I am in my home inviting people. And so at home, there's a lot more vulnerability to that. And it puts you in that space of being vulnerable to opening yourself up and allowing people to see you in your own home space. And, you know, I think we all sort of have this unnatural way of striving for perfection, and nothing's ever perfect. And that is what's beautiful about entertaining is that stuff always happens, nothing's ever perfect, but the idea of hosting isn't really about being perfect. It's about being thoughtful and putting your best foot forward. And when your guests see that you put a lot of thought into welcoming them into your home, um, then no matter what would happen, they appreciate just the fact that you've opened yourself up and welcomed them in to your life.
Gosh, I couldn't say it any better. That's what we all talk about here, like all the time, is like you really
Yeah,
are much more vulnerable in your own home and you're kind of like showing your mess to everybody, whether that mess be like a physical mess or maybe you're
yeah,
stressed and doing the stuff or whatever. But
yeah.
that's great. And not being perfect but thoughtful. That's so good. So great. Let's talk about your book a little bit, Mastering the Art of Entertaining, right? I got that right, I hope.
Mhm. Yep.
Um, I love that you have these sections, and I have some specific questions about them because as I was reading through, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to know this. So, preparing your home. And one of the things
Hmm.
you said was like having conversation nooks or like getting your house ready to have places for people to kind of like sit and gather. How do
Yep.
you get people to not hover over where the food is and like actually sit down? So in my house, I have a colonial house. All the rooms have walls. So it's not a
Hmm.
super big open concept, which I'm totally okay with. But everybody always stays in the kitchen right around the island. And nobody ever
Yeah.
goes and sits in the like dining room with like multiple chairs or the living room
Yeah.
with like a giant couch. No one ever sits down. And every time I'm like, why don't we go sit? Why, you guys are free to
Yeah.
sit. Nobody ever does.
Yeah.
How do you get them to sit down?
So I think, well, to start with, I think there's something about that in that um, we have come into a generation where everything is sort of this open concept. And I've always lived in houses that have separate rooms, which I prefer, because I think it allows you to create more stories throughout your home for people to discover than
Hmm.
just one huge open space. And so, but I think we're in a generation where because uh, everything is this open concept living, that people have just learned in their own homes with family to gravitate in the kitchen. Although when you do it often enough and you start really seeing it, you can sort of tell that like it does get in the way of the host cooking and having to shuffle around the kitchen and do stuff. And so what I typically like to do is I like to make sure that I'm prepared enough before guests come that I'm not stuck in the kitchen. And I like to spread things around the house into different rooms so that I can create different stories in different rooms. And by doing that, maybe it's different flower arrangements in different rooms, maybe it's different food. Um, but I try to get a flow of people to walk around. And I feel like the best way that that's going to come from is from the host not being in the kitchen. So I never greet people in my kitchen.
Mm. Oh my gosh,
I
I do that all
actually
the
don't.
time.
I don't even allow them in the kitchen um, until the party is going, and then if people want to come in the kitchen and hang out, fine. But I never really greet them in the kitchen. So I always have, even if I need to set the bar up in the kitchen, I will always have a table at the front door with either like a wine or a champagne or like uh, bottled water, but something that I can put in people's hands when they walk through the door to sort of take their ease off so that they don't feel like they have to gravitate to the kitchen because I think that's people's safety place.
Yeah. Oh, those are such good tips. I tend to just kind of like be in the kitchen. So I'm gonna have to start taking myself out for sure. And I've tried that where I will like set stuff up in other rooms and I'll like say like the appetizers are here, make yourself a drink at the bar in the living room or whatever. And they all still end up in the kitchen. So
Yeah,
um
and one of the things you can do too is like, so if you know who you're inviting and who's coming over, you could put something new in that room, whether it's a photograph of, a new photograph of your kids or something that you know would be of interest to another one of your guests. And you can say, hey, come in here. I wanted to show you this new thing that I have. And you'll just by naturally, other people will gravitate to come with you. And that's how you can start getting people into other rooms without physically saying to them, well, go sit in that room. But it's so instead of pushing them out, you're inviting them in.
yeah, that's so good. So good. Okay, so another section in the book is managing a crowd and getting people to have conversations that are a little bit deeper than like surface level. So how are
Uh,
you encouraging that when you're having a party or hosting people?
so one of my favorite things are called conversation cards.
Hmm.
And sometimes, so I've created these little conversation cards that I come up with questions and I write them on the conversation cards. And, you can like type, do them typefaced in like Adobe or Word or whatever, and have them printed on like Vistaprint and put them around the house. And so you can create the conversation and the narrative that you want people to start sharing
Yeah.
using those cards. I use them a lot, but I'll also use other things like I found these vintage French flashcards that have a French word on one side and the English on the opposite side. And I've used that before to like get conversation going, right? So people normally ask us how France is going and all of that. So I try to bring something back from France to stimulate conversation. Um, but I think that, sometimes you have to be the one again as the host stimulating that conversation because it takes a lot for other people to come out of their shell to talk more than just about, so what do you do for work? You know,
Yeah.
um, so by creating questions that you think would be interesting, you're allowing other people to then start conversations. And it also helps you as a host because you could use those cards, get a conversation going, and then excuse yourself out of that group while they continue to talk to go to another group or to get back in the kitchen or do whatever.
Love that. And I think we kind of get in this routine of like, oh, what do you do for work? How is your weekend? Like these very the same conversations over and over. And I love that that's something that's like could be like totally off the wall and it's not, it takes us out of that
Yeah,
routine of the
yeah,
typical things
yeah.
we talk about. So that's great.
And I have found, I have found also that it really helps. I think in our political climate today, people are scared to
Hmm.
talk and they don't know what to talk about. And I think those cards really help to keep people to open up conversation about things other than, the 24/7 newsreels of politics, which I have like a strict rule in my house that that's not, you're here to get away from everything in life, not to, add to it. So
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
they're a
Okay.
really good
So
tool.
yeah, I'm gonna have to start implementing some of that for sure. I had a guest on the podcast like way at the beginning of when the podcast started, Amber, and gosh, I can't remember the name of the company, but they sell convokins. It's napkins with conversation starter questions on them. And they have a
Yeah.
bunch of other stuff too, but like party stuff like that. But those are really cool because you typically will have a napkin with like your drink and it has like this fun
Yep.
question on it. So I
Yep.
think those are great.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
so other parts of the book, cooking for a crowd, tables that shine, and recipes for entertaining. Can we talk a little bit about like something easy you can do for a crowd or like easy recipes that maybe people that aren't like the most skilled in the kitchen can do or like it's
Mhm.
kind of like a go-to no matter what?
Mhm. Yep. Um, so for me, I think the easiest thing, if as long as you have a Cuisinart food processor, I think some of the easiest recipes are creating dips. You
Yeah.
can create dips out of beans, out of artichokes, out of sun-dried tomatoes. I think that's some of the easiest things because there's not a lot of cooking necessarily involved with it for people. So, and I do say in the book, if you're not really a skilled cook or you don't think you are, um, you don't have to rely on creating your entire menu to where you're cooking. You should try to make something, right? You should, because that's what part of hosting and entertaining is honing your craft for what you are comfortable doing. Um, but you can supplement it with food purchased at, a gourmet food shop or somewhere else. And I talk about, it's okay to have that stuff when you're entertaining, but the real mark of a good host is somebody that would actually take stuff off of those plastic platters, put it on their own platters, and still presenting it to their guests to say, I've thought about this and I've thought about you, and I'm not just giving you food off of a plastic platter. Maybe I didn't make it, but I'm making it beautiful for you so that it looks even better, right?
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
yeah.
That's a great idea. I love that concept of like you're not actually cooking, you're just like combining things essentially for
Hmm.
like dips or
Hmm.
a salad or like whatever it might be when you can just combine things or like if you could be the assembly person, like you don't have to cook, you just assemble stuff. So
Exactly.
that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, awesome. Well, I think those parts of the book are so essential to like any sort of entertaining. So I'm really excited to like dive deeper into all of
Thanks.
that you have to
Yeah.
say about them. Um, I did kind of want to ask, since we have holidays coming up, a couple kind of holiday focused questions here. I
Hmm.
know like we all love traditions when it comes to the holidays and kind of doing the same thing over and over. But do you have any recommendations or advice on like maybe you want to mix it up a little bit or you want to make it, maybe still the same tradition, but like you're doing something that's going to like spice it up a little bit? What are your kind of
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
So for me, I'm also a traditionalist when it comes to Thanksgiving and Christmas. And but this year we're hosting four people for Thanksgiving. And I thought, why not do like instead of doing the whole turkey and mashed potatoes and all of that, I'm gonna do really great elevated turkey club sandwiches.
Oh, love that.
So it's still fresh roasted turkey. It's going to be like a cranberry mayonnaise. We'll still have like some side dishes to go with it, but rather than just like a traditional turkey, I'm making club sandwiches. And I think that you could find unique ways of just sort of reinventing the same stuff that you always do. So you don't have to completely recreate something new, just present it in a different way.
Yeah, that's great. Um, and I think you could do that with so many things, like through Christmas and stuff. Do like Christmas cookies, you can make into a cocktail or like have the cookie as like a garnish or something. Yeah, you can do lots of different
Exactly.
things. That's really cool.
Exactly.
I think we're hosting like 14 to 20 people for Thanksgiving. So I'm
Okay.
like, I was discussing with my husband today. I was like, I really need to start thinking about all this food and where
Yeah.
everybody's going to be. So it'll
Yeah.
be it'll be fun though. So
That's quite the endeavor.
I mean, it's kind of typical. We like he has a big family. We have friends coming in from out of town, so I kind of want to make it. It's the first time that they've had Thanksgiving with us. I kind of want to make it special for them. So
Yeah.
it'll be
Yeah.
good though. It's fun. This month is full of hosting. We have people staying with us like every weekend and lots of things going on. So,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
good. That's what we enjoy doing. So it works out.
Yeah, I do too. I love that.
Is there from like your professional event setup, design, catering, is there something people can do as like an everyday host that is like kind of a hidden tip as a professional style, like event stylist that we should like start doing in our homes to make it maybe a little bit more professional or just make it smoother, run easier?
Are you asking specifically whether it's like from design and decoration style or just anything that would be implemented, whether it's in the kitchen or out in the
Let's talk like
home?
design of the party because I love setting a good tablescape. I love like, having a backdrop if it's like kind of a birthday party or something, something like that. So is there
Mhm.
something on a professional level that like makes that a little bit easier?
So, I don't think I wouldn't speak in terms of something being easier because I think it's always going to be work, and that's part of what entertaining is. You have to love the work of it because you find the joy in it. What I would say is, I find that a lot of people, when they do, say if they're doing a sit-down dinner, or even a buffet, um, they try to stretch their centerpiece out through the whole table. And a lot of times it ends up looking sparse because you've taken all this real estate to try to fill up, and it's very expensive to fill up all of that real estate. And so, like I do talk about this in the book, if you're going to create a centerpiece, think of more than just having a vase of flowers. So you can have a vase of flowers. Maybe you get this amazing gourd that you put next to it. And then maybe even like I collect um, like quartz and crystals and all of that. So one year I did a whole display of flowers and all of my collected quartz crystals on the table. Um, you can make a vignette, which always makes a nicer presentation on a table. Um, but you don't have to spread it out. So think about clumping it in together to make it something visually bigger and better than if it's stretched out. And even consider offsetting it. So, rather than it being in the middle of the table, offset it to 1/3 of the table. And then you can put something else on this other 1/3, like maybe it is your platter with your turkey on it, right? And then that just becomes another centerpiece on your table. Um, but I would say, rethink what you're doing about centerpieces and um, rather than spreading them out, bring them closer together. And I think sometimes too, I talk about it in the book, repetition on a table is always important. The more you can repeat either colors or patterns or shapes, the more cohesive your table is going to look.
Love that. I always tell people you can get like a much bigger impact if you put everything together versus spreading everything out. Like a
Mhm.
birthday party, you'll have like all these things everywhere, and it's like nobody
Yeah,
really gets the theme or sees it because it's
yeah,
like
right.
dispersed amongst your normal
It's so
stuff. But if
spread
you
out.
like
Right.
make one spot of everything, it's
Right.
like a much bigger
Exactly.
impact. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. And I love the idea of offsetting on a table too, though, because I typically find that I don't have space to like put the food because like
Yep.
my table's
Yep.
not huge, but like, having the centerpiece and then glasses and stuff, it's like, where do I actually put the dishes? So I love that idea of kind of offsetting to make the space. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. This is just kind of a fun question because I think you probably have some great, interesting things to say. But were there any sort of like crazy mishaps that you had, like working for Martha Stewart Living or like celebrity professional events that you designed? And then like, did you have to like pivot or how did you make it seem like, oh, that mishap didn't happen?
Um, gosh, I mean, there's always something that goes wrong.
Yeah.
So, it's, gosh, what can I say? I think, I it wasn't really a mishap on my part, but I guess the mishap was anytime I do a private dinner party for people, I will go through the kitchen and look in the ovens and all of that. And I was doing a consultation for somebody once, and it was a Christmas dinner, well, pre-Christmas dinner, but it was for about 40, 45 people. So it was all their family coming together. And I never looked in the oven. Just, it was a really nice kitchen. I never looked in the oven. Got there the day of the party, opened up the oven to heat it up to roast a pork loin in it. And I don't think it had been cleaned in probably 65 years.
Oh my gosh.
There was literally like dust, like hanging from everywhere with grease on the dust. So it
Oh
also hadn't
gosh.
been used. And that was the only method for cooking this pork loin. So I literally lined the oven with aluminum foil around all of the stuff. So I kind of like made this giant tent to roast this pork in, just because I thought this stuff's just going to heat up and just like drop right on the pork loin. Um, so it's why I say something always happens because it just does. And, the mark of a good host is that you learn to be quick and think and just roll with the punches, right? Because you don't want to let them see you sweat. But you just have to come up with um, really fast ideas. I mean, another one was a dinner party that I hosted, and I always ask people if they have allergies or something that they don't like to eat. And the one guest said, no, we eat anything. We eat anything. Okay, so I was making this amazing, like, roasted tomato, blue cheese, and shrimp pasta dish. And came time to throw the shrimp into the dish in the oven with all the tomatoes and the olive oil. And the one person said to me, oh, the only thing I don't eat is shrimp. And I was like, and this is like pasta's on the stove, like boiling. So we're going to eat in about 6 minutes. And I thought, okay, no problem. And they were in the kitchen with me. And I said, you know what? Let's go refill your glass. And I ushered them out to the living room, sat them down, and I was like, not a problem. Give me 5 minutes. And I went to the refrigerator. I knew I had butter and milk. So I ended up making a cream sauce, threw the rest of the blue cheese in there, some walnuts, and I made him a blue cheese cream sauce for his pasta in a matter of about 6 minutes. And so again, it's like you just never know
Yeah.
what's going to happen. Even if it's not your fault, stuff happens.
Well, thankfully that person was like in the kitchen and saw this happening because my goodness, if it was just like a preference, I feel like that's one thing. But if it's like an allergy and like like you had a lot of things going on there, like dairy, shellfish, all this stuff, like you
Totally.
could like really
Yep,
harm
nuts.
somebody. That's
Yep,
crazy. Oh
yep,
my gosh. Okay. Well, this has been so informative and really fun to hear from a professional and somebody who's kind of that done it on a bigger scale. And I know Mastering the Art of Entertaining looks absolutely beautiful. So can you tell everybody where they can find the book and learn more about
yep,
you?
yep. You can find it on Amazon or Barnes and Nobles or Books a Million, pretty much any online retailer. You'll find a link for it there.
Awesome. And we'll make sure we put a link in the show notes to your
Okay.
website and the book and everything so they can
Yeah.
go through all those sections and learn a little bit
Yeah.
more about how to
And
do
I
it the
and I
best way.
and I I also encourage people to my handle on Instagram is at home with Joseph. And if anybody does have a book and has a question, I always welcome people to send me an instant message and ask me questions.
That's great. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna get into these last call questions and
Okay.
they're just kind of fun party focused ones. So what has been your favorite party to host? I'm sure that's kind of hard with like so many.
Personally, I love to host Christmas cocktail parties.
Mm.
I go crazy decorating and I love to host Christmas cocktail parties. I think they're a lot of fun. The food ends up being very intricate because it's a lot of hors d'oeuvres, so it takes a lot of time and it's a lot of work. Um, but I feel like I always thoroughly enjoy myself doing that. Professionally, my favorite party that I did professionally was a dinner where President Jimmy Carter was the guest of honor for the dinner.
Wow,
So that
that's
was a
amazing.
fun one. Yeah.
That's really cool. Awesome. And then what is the best community you've been a part of and what's made it so great?
Um, Aside from doing a lot of charity-based event stuff, because I do in order to support a lot of charities, I would say through my work professionally, I've gained some lifelong friends just that were initially clients.
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's been like the most rewarding for what I've done because they've, for 30 years now, have been very close friends of mine. So
Yeah, that's really
I,
cool when
I
like it can turn into a friendship. It's not just like a
yeah.
transaction.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's how I've made some of my best friends is through doing hosting and catering and all of that.
That's awesome. All right, last one here. What is your best party hosting tip? Again, I'm sure you have like 1,000.
Um, got it. I would say be prepared. And by that, I mean, you can always prepare almost anything ahead of time and something still happens. But be prepared. I talk about it in the book is have kits set up for things to deal with eventualities. And what that means is like I always do an emergency spill kit. So I'm ready if something happens. So I have a bucket and a mop that's already filled with detergent, ready if I need to mop something. The vacuum is right there. There's Windex and paper towels, there's stain removers. It's all in one spot in the closet. So the worst thing in a party is if 10 of your guests are now stumbling and fumbling and where's this, where's that, and trying to clean up, you can just go attack it right away. Another one is like a toiletry kit for people that has, Band-Aids and thread with a needle and feminine products and hairspray and nail polish and mouthwash that just it sits in the bathroom so that if somebody does need something, again, when they ask for it, you're not fumbling around to try to figure out where it is. You're prepared.
Gosh, those are so good. And like having the mop bucket filled already, genius. Like,
Yeah.
and like, what's the worst that happens? You don't use it, you just dump it out. Like, that's
Exactly.
so smart.
And
So,
you
so
just might
smart.
use it at the end of the night when you're cleaning up the kitchen. So yeah,
Yeah, good point.
yeah,
Oh, Joseph, this has been so fun. I feel like I could talk to you forever. And I love that so many of the things you said are exactly how I feel or things that we've talked about on here so many times. And it never hurts to just like hear it again and to hear it from a professional, I think will really bring some value and like hit it home for a lot of people of, how to best host and to make it great for yourself, but great for your guests too. So thanks again for
yeah.
being here. And we'll have
It was
links to
my
everything
pleasure.
so everybody can find you.
Sounds great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.